time for the press preview then. It's our first look at what is on the front of tomorrow's papers. We're going to check out the headlines tonight with the CEO of Total Politics Group, Mark Wallace, and the Daily Mirror columnist, Susie Boniface. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. Nice to see you both. We'll chat in a moment after we've had a look at some of those front pages for you. Red alert, Storm Darragh makes the front of the Western Mail, while the Daily Mail exclusively speaks to the Chancellor, who says the government can't raise defence spending without making sacrifices elsewhere. Saturday's Telegraph leads on households potentially facing higher energy bills to pay for nuclear reactors as the government prioritises its net zero plans. Let's bring in The Guardian, reporting on the number of rape victims pulling out of prosecutions before trial, increasing due to delays in the court system. The Eye says the government is preparing to drop the pre-election commitment to cut A&E waiting times to 4 hours. The Times says MI5 has been forced to shift focus from counter-terrorism to deal with threats posed by Russia and other hostile states. Meanwhile, tomorrow's FT reports on Romania's top court cancelling the presidential election following allegations that Russia used social media to promote the leading candidate. Love is the light that can shine bright even in our darkest times. The Express quotes the Princess of Wales' message of hope at her annual carol service a bit earlier this evening. While the Mirror writes that the Princess was shining at the event. The Sun says she lights up Christmas. And the Star tells its readers that currying favour with your boss might be the best way to a promotion. And don't forget, you can scan the QR code that you see on screen during the programme. Check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us discussing them. And to do that, Mark Wallace and Susie Boniface are both here. Great. Well, let's get cracking, shall we? Starting, Susie, if you would, with the front page of the Times. This is interesting, isn't it? MI5 shifting its focus from terrorists to rogue states.
Yep, so there's two aspects of this story, and there's a longer interview inside. And what it is talking about, basically, is that Director General of MI5, Ken McCallum, has said that, we're not focusing quite so much on, lone wolf activists and terrorist groups. We're having to deal now with states like Russia and Iran, North Korea, organisations which are far, far bigger and are, multi-layered, not just one group of individuals. And that's now, we've had this sort of 30 years, we haven't had to worry about enemy states, and now we are worrying about enemy states again. They're big actors now on the stage. The other thing is that he said all this in a podcast, which has been produced by Simon Case, the outgoing Cabinet Secretary, who has decided to start a podcast for civil servants, which will only be on the civil service intranet, so sorry people, you won't be able to watch it, and it's been called Keeping It Civil, which is just one of the most awful puns I think I've ever heard. And if you're talking to someone like the Director General of MI5, the fact that he wants to talk to a podcast is kind of astonishing. But
should he be talking at all?
Well, he does talk fairly commonly about various challenges they face. That's fair enough. But if you're going to have him on a podcast, then, you've got various things. You've got, like, licence to broadcast on Her Majesty's Wi-Fi service. You could, licence to skip the ads. I don't know. There's loads of stuff that you could make a far better title for it than Keeping It Civil.
Yeah. What do you make of this, Mark?
Well, it is a remarkable sign of the changing times, isn't it? It's, 35 years since various parts of the security services only officially acknowledged to have existed at all. And now, Q's on TikTok and
has got a podcast.
Presumably on Snapchat, and MI5 are doing a podcast. But, it is interesting. I think there's a degree, dare I say, that this is, I think, slightly over-egged. The fact is that we've seen in just over a decade, we've had Russia carry out a radiological attack on the streets of London. We've had a chemical weapons nerve agent attack on the streets of Salisbury. We've had a whole series of attacks. We had the honey trap campaign targeted at MPs, among others, by an as yet unspecified but quite sophisticated organised campaign, which seems quite likely to have been involved with some kind of hostile state. So it's not that they've been completely off the pitch in this time, right? But this is it's an interesting sign of the instability of the world in which we live. Yeah. The fact is we have fortunately seen organisations like, for example, ISIS crumble in recent years, but not completely go away. the question for the security service is always, how do you make sure that you're not preparing for the last war? Because eventually you have to change focus again. Obviously they have to make sure they're keeping an eye on both sides of both of the horses in this kind of race.
Well, it leads us very nicely, doesn't it, on to the next story on the front of the FT and events in Romania, which have been really both shocking and fascinating, Susie. The election there for president scrapped after it's believed that Russia interfered.
Yeah, and obviously Romania is a country which has got very recent and also very long-lasting memories of Russian interference under the old USSR. So it's not the kind of thing that they sort of take with a pinch of salt or think that, well, it's not so bad. But they've had an election in the first round vote, and the guy who won it was a right-wing populist, didn't do an awful lot of electioneering, did a lot of stuff on social media, and the current president has published some classified documents claiming that this was all a result of Russian interference, that they planned this and they paid these actors or the influencers to support him and so on, and they're very keen to get this guy in pace. So the court has just scrapped the election then. The whole thing, that's it, it's off, kind of thing. And on the one hand, yes, if someone's interfered, you have to deal with it. But on the other, you can't scrap an entire election. And we don't know the extent that they were able to influence that vote. A few TikTok influencers can switch some voters to in their vote. But it's not going to sway everybody in the country. TikTok, I shouldn't think, has that greater penetration in Romania. So did they actually need to do that? I don't know. It's a bit dodgy when you start overthrowing your democratic institutions and saying that your system isn't good enough to withstand a little bit of online interference.
But don't talk about switching.
Sorry.
Oh, my God, it's awful. Interestingly, both candidates are really angry about this decision.
Yes, not least probably because they've spent all the money that they were going to spend on their campaigns, and now they can't get it back. But, I mean, it's just another sign of the severity of this. When we hear Vladimir Putin talk about, if you keep supporting Ukraine, I'll escalate, I might go to war with the West or with your institutions. This is already happening. The fact is that we have a Russian land war a second Russian land war in Ukraine, obviously grinding on at vast and dreadful cost. We have the direct overthrow of democracy in Georgia, hundreds of thousands of people on the streets in Tbilisi and elsewhere there, as your colleagues have been reporting. We have these events in Romania. We've had the security threats that we've just talked about, the direct assaults. We've seen cables cut under the Baltic and so on. This asymmetric warfare by Russia is already happening. It's already on us, and our choice is whether we fight back or not.
OK. Let's talk about events back here. Mark, why don't you kick off on this one? It's on the front of the eye. Labour is dropping its NHS pledge, apparently, to bring down any waiting times. Wanted to bring them down to 4 hours, but I guess they've looked at the situation and decided that actually it's too difficult.
So it seems, and I mean, it's not been a very happy couple of days for Sir Keir Starmer on this front. He had his big speech yesterday, which, as you'll recall, wasn't a reset, but kind of sounded like a reset. And it laid out his plan for change, which was setting out new missions and new targets that weren't any different to were different from his manifesto, but didn't countermand the manifesto. They don't replace those promises. There's also missions, goals, targets and pledges of various sorts. And if you've kept up with that, you're doing better than I am. And I think this is starting to get potentially a bit risky for the government. We saw in the plan for change yesterday, there were some things Keir Starmer did want to change. They've watered down their clean energy pledge, for example. If they're watering down A&E pledges as well, or as is reported, I think in the Times later in our stack of stories, that he's already backtracking on some of the things he said about the civil service. You can have one plan or another plan. What you can't have is 4 or 5 different plans in parallel. If you get the reputation that you don't really mean one promise and you might disappear from it a few months later, people will tune out, they'll stop listening.
There is a danger, as history has shown us, of making pledges, making big promises and then not delivering. Yeah,
but it's even worse, like Mark was saying, if you repeatedly make promises and pledges that sound vaguely similar to the last ones but are all slightly different, and if the general tone of the conversation around them is that you've dropped something or changed something or you're not really admitting to something. What he should have done is make this big speech 5 months ago, bang, I'm in, this is what we're doing, and then stuck to it, and then never resiled from it, stayed with that. And instead, we've got all these reviews that are running across Westminster now. Some of them have been delayed and pushed back even further, like the Strategic Defence Review. But They haven't reported back yet. So the fact he's changing the plan before they've reported back, again, it means they're only going to change again, presumably at some point in the future. And it adds to this overall tone of indecision and internal ups and downs, we don't know what's going on kind of thing, chaos, which is exactly what people voted not to have after the chaos of the Conservative last few governments. So it's sort of eating away at his political capital, whatever there is of it, is eroding if he's not shoring up his own reputation.
Yeah, I also think it's a bit brave, shall we say, to choose to talk about change, and then the main change you seem to be doing is changing your own promises. It kind of slightly plays into itself. And, I mean, there are a few of these rumbling away. There are various people in the press asking questions of different ministers to see if they have the same account, and then asking Keir Starmer if he stands by them. So when Rachel Reeves told the CBI, the business body, a couple of weeks ago, she will not be coming back for another tax raid, so Keir Starmer himself now sounds quite reluctant to say those very words. I think he now says the plan is not to come back for another tax raid. And if you keep doing that, people get very cynical very quickly, because we've seen a lot of politicians who break promises.
OK, well, let's talk about this in the Times then, because, it's not unconnected with Keir Starmer backtracking on civil service decline, Susie, saying he's been praising the sense of public service amongst civil servants after unions accused him of unleashing a Trumpian attack.
Well, and what actually happened was in the speech he said that that civil service has become sort of happy in the tepid bath of managed decline. And it's not really a Trumpian attack so much as saying that everyone seems to have accepted the status quo of Britain being a bit rubbish, and the civil service are part of that mindset and it needs to change. I think Trump would have gone far harder and stronger against a civil service, and Boris Johnson and Liz Truss certainly did. But even so, then the Civil Service Union have come out and accused him of this, so then he's had to resign from it. And we get this ping-pong situation where you say something to try and look strong, then someone criticises you in a way for being too strong, then you have to apologise for being too strong, and then the thing you were trying to do at the start, which is look strong, has gone. And the whole thing was a complete waste of time. Might as well have not bothered. You either say it and mean it, stand by it, or don't say it in the first place.
Yeah, really quick thought, Mark.
Particularly if you're the Prime Minister. I mean, the fact is, he was accused by the Civil Service Union of being insulting. If he believes in his analysis, he shouldn't mind too much if somebody happens to think it's insulting. The question is it true or not? I was at an event the other day. We publish Civil Service World, the magazine for senior civil servants, and we had an event all about how do you change and reform how the civil service works. And actually, I was quite struck by how much enthusiasm there is among civil servants to learn how to do that. So if you can find the right people to put in the right jobs, they could probably do it for him, if he wants to stick to it.
Great. All right, we shall leave it there for the moment. Coming up after the break, could Gregg Wallace seek to blame his inappropriate behaviour on undiagnosed autism? And does that risk causing further offence? Discussing that and plenty more in a couple of minutes.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon.
I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it.
Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live.
Joins us live.
All in one place, and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent.
based here in Washington, D.C.
Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate.
There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
It's a Premier League double derby weekend on USA. First, on Saturday, Liverpool look to strengthen their title run against Everton in the Merseyside derby. Then Sunday, Chelsea aim to stay in the hunt when they face Tottenham in a London derby.
And this meeting might shift the dial in that derby.
The Premier League double derby weekend on USA.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Susie and Mark still with me. Susie, why don't you start on this? It's the front of the Telegraph. Gregg Wallace expected to tell independent investigators that he could be suffering from undiagnosed autism.
Yes, the very cynical amongst our viewers may have expected something like this since the start of the Gregg Wallace scandal. He has a son who has autism. Quite famously, he spends about 90 minutes a day with him, according to one of his own articles that he wrote. And it's now being briefed out, it would appear by people close to, in quote marks, Gregg Wallace, that this is what he will tell investigators, maybe, if they ever ask him why he did this. Despite the fact there are many autistic people all up and down the length of this country that do not do any of the things Gregg Wallace has been accused of doing. So, yes, I think it's probably going to quite likely cause some cynical eyebrows to be raised and some people to be quite offended, which is just par for the course of Gregg, isn't it?
It definitely looks like within the last 5 days, Gregg Wallace has done what he probably should have done last Saturday and phoned a PR person to try and do something. I'm not sure this approach is definitely going to work or help. On behalf of the Wallace community, I would like to distance us all from the conduct of this particular rogue Wallace.
I'm waiting for Gregg's Bakery to tell us what they think about it.
Hands off Gregg's Bakery. No, not allowed.
It's interesting when you talk about the advice, isn't it? Because either he didn't have any advice, which is possible, or he was given advice but just chose to ignore it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at how people often react in a crisis when they haven't got someone who knows what they're doing, kind of talking to them about how to deal with it, it often looks like the kind of thing you saw at the weekend, which is siege mentality, the kind of attempt to kind of, no, but if everyone got to know me or just heard my side of the story, as long as I get to speak, people will understand. There's often a real conviction of that, and then some really unwise lashing out at your victims, all women, anyone who...
But if the scandal is based upon the fact that you appear arrogant and don't get why the things you say are really offensive and you shouldn't have said them, then that video just kind of substantitiated it because he was clearly arrogant and didn't get it.
Which he then had to go and apologise for, and of course we should say that his lawyers have said that he denies all the allegations. I just want to finish on the weather because the storm is about to hit. Storm Darragh, front of the Western Mail, red alert, rare danger to life warning as Storm Darragh set to lash Wales. Lots of parts of the country are going to be affected by this. The government sent out these text alerts. 3 million people got this message saying that the storm was on its way. I mean, useful, sensible?
Well, it would have been a few million more if it wasn't Wales and everyone had a decent signal because the broadband signal in that part of the world is woeful. because of government lack of infrastructure. Yeah, it's helpful. It's a good thing to do. I'm sure people will be paying attention. But the people who will suffer most as a result of that kind of storm will be the ones who either don't pay attention to those kind of warnings or who don't have the phone in the first place to get the warning. It's one of those things where we're going to have more extreme and more severe weather. This is only the 4th storm of the season. We will get to, 8 or 10 probably. And there are going to be people all over the length of the country who are going to have to become more resilient, or their homes or their infrastructure are going to find ways to be more resilient to cope with this, because it's not going away.
OK, thank you both very much. We will chat more in a couple of minutes. We're going to have a look at the weather forecast now, actually, just to give you all the details. Storm Darragh will cross the UK and Ireland tonight and tomorrow, bringing damage and disruption. Yellow and amber weather warnings have been issued, including a rare red wind warning for coastal parts of Wales, southwest England and Western Ireland. Now, gales look prolonged and widespread tomorrow, severe in places, perhaps reaching storm force for some western coasts. Expect a stormy start in the west, whereas some eastern areas like eastern England will be relatively calm. The wind will pick up in the east through the morning, while damaging winds affect Ireland and Western Britain. Some coastal regions in Wales and southwest England will see gusts in excess of 90 miles an hour, spells of heavy rain as well. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, more on that red warning of a danger to life as Storm Darragh bears down on the UK. And more on the breaking news that police in New York searching for the gunman who shot a healthcare executive have found a backpack, but also say he has left the city.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Conflict. They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.